Jy is geskakel op die Groot Ontbyt, Groot FM 90.5 en dan ook kanaal 144 op kyk net. Ons eerste gas vanoggend in die ateljee en ons soos ek gesê het 'n vol program. Prins Mashele, a big welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And it's your second time. I was on leave, so I thought it's your first time explaining everything and
When you are away, I take over your chair.
that's how it works. En hy senior navorsingsgenoot studie van bestuurs en beheer innovasie by die Universiteit van Pretoria. So I just want to find out first, let's get back into your background for a while. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born and raised in a dusty village called Agincourt. Believe it or not, there's a village like that in South Africa, somewhere in Bushbuck Ridge, Mpumalanga. That's where I was born and went to high school there.
School and everything in Mpumalanga.
Primary, secondary school, and I only got out of the village to university, which is the University of Venda, where I did my BA, majoring in political science, and later on did an honors degree there. And I moved on from the University of Venda to Rhodes University to do a master's degree, and the rest is history.
Sure. So what do you remember most of your childhood?
To be honest, my childhood was not filled with great events to narrate. I was just an ordinary boy waking up. I was a shepherd looking after my father's goats, playing soccer on gravel field, that kind of boring, uneventful life.
So you think something like education, just uplifted you or gave you a new life?
Look, if I didn't go to school, I wouldn't be sitting here this morning. I would be like many boys who were unlucky, ended up sinking their lives into alcoholism and drugs and that kind of thing. Education is the best thing. It takes a villager from nowhere and puts him in a studio like this.
Have you always imagined yourself going into the politics?
Honestly not. In fact, when I went to university, the typical educated guy in the village would hope to become a teacher. So in my time, I was also aspiring to become a teacher because teachers were the educated people there, successful people there. So we looked after them. After them. So when I went to university, I went to study teaching. So what happened is I actually took courses that would eventually make me a teacher. So I majored in my vernacular, which is Xitsonga, and English. But I also took a third course because I was advised by a friend that this is a good course. I actually didn't know where I would go with it. That is political science. So down the road, I actually fell in love with political science. That's how I became a political scientist. So it was by pure accident. I didn't know that there was such a thing when I was going to school in the village.
Wow.
And then if you look back now, if you go back to the village, did things change? Is it different, or is it still part of the struggle of economic freedom?
Well, things haven't changed much. What has changed is there is now electricity in the village. There's running water. I think those two things have changed life big time in the village. There's also television because of that. When we were growing up, there was no electricity. There was no running water. So in other words, we didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world. Where would we see it? Because there was no television. So we were closed in this little island in South Africa. But in terms of poverty, there's still lots of poverty in that village. So in other words, my life, the way I grew up, is not so different from the life of a young man today. There's no library in my former school, for example. There was no library at the time. I didn't know the thing called library until I went to university.
Sure, it's shocking. I remember one of my previous colleagues, my previous job, Percy, said to me, just to try to explain to people being 25 or 26 years old and for the first time in your house being able to open a tap. And I think that's still the world we live in. That's really different from each other. And that makes interviews like this just fantastic. If you can give something back, to your people, what will that be in your village?
It's education.
Education.
I am involved, by the way, in a local school there. I donate money from my pocket. Of course, I'm not a millionaire. I can only donate the little that I get from my salary from the university. And I know that I'm a role model there, so I go there a lot. In fact, this weekend I'm going down there to attend a wedding ceremony of a friend, this and that. So I make sure that I go there. Young people must look at me and say, it is possible to get out of this environment and be a somebody. I'm not a celebrity. I don't consider myself a celebrity, but at least the work I do places me on the public stage. So just to have young people in the village to see that through education you can make it and live a decent life, that's the best thing I can give back to the village.
Sure. So I hope you play the lotto, and then you can donate a lot after winning.
Prince, if we have a look at your career thus far, your biggest or greatest challenges up to date, what would you say they are?
Look, I would say apart from the difficulties of establishing a career coming from the village in a big city like Pretoria and Johannesburg, if we isolate that, because that's typical, I would say my greatest challenge has been learning how to write and write well. Because in my work, it's not mainly about talking. It's mainly about writing.
Yeah.
So having gone to terrible schools in the village and went to not so good university like the University of Venda, as a researcher, it was not easy for me to bring myself up to scratch when it comes to writing. That was the biggest challenge. That meant spending sleepless nights, reading a lot, practicing to write. And I still, by the way, read a lot to this day, trying to improve myself. I think that I would highlight it as my main challenge.
Sure.
And then, but it worked, because at one stage you were a speechwriter for the president, and you told us now it was in Thabo Mbeki's time, and it's something we, as public, don't know a lot about. How does that process work to be a speechwriter?
Look, most people think that presidents write their own speeches. Let me dispel that myth. There is no single president in the world. It does not matter how bright that president is, can have all the time to write his own speeches. An average president would address maybe 5 meetings per day. Where would he find time to write all of those speeches? So there's a whole team behind every president. The job of that team on a daily basis is to look at where the president is going, to imagine the audience that the president will be addressing, and write speeches for that president. So what happens is there would be an event that is coming. You know that that event is coming. You are asked to write a speech. Sometimes you sit with the president, the advisor to the president will sit with the president and say, the president will say, I want these points to be in the speech. And then those points are given to the speech writers. You do a draft, and then the president looks at it. If it is a thoughtful president like former President Thabo Mbeki, the speech will come back to you as speech writers with lots of red pens, delete this, get me a quote from that book, until the speech begins to take shape. Eventually, the president would put his fingerprints on the speech. Sometimes you can only trace 50% of what you put into the speech. So it's a back and forth process involving lots of people.
Sure. And in your view, who's our best speaker in terms of politicians, whether it's a president or just a minister? Who do you think, if you listen how they speak, who's up there?
Look, currently I would say, believe it or not, the best orator we have is Julius
Malema. Yes, he is very good.
The good thing about Julius Malema is that the guy can speak off script.
Yeah.
So he does not need a written speech to write. And when you listen to him, he's still coherent from beginning to end. He flows. He's discursive. That's what most politicians lack. If you listen, for example, to President Jacob Zuma, he's one of our terrible speech readers. You fall asleep in the middle of him trying to deliver a speech. It does not matter how important the subject is. It does not connect to the written script. I think it's a function of lack of education on the part of the old man. I think Julius is currently the best speaker. Musi Maimane is not bad, by the way.
Yes.
He's also a lively speaker. You listen to him when he speaks. But the problem with Musi is this. Sometimes you get a sense that there's lack of originality. The emotion.
Yes.
It's as if he's acting for different audiences.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's a bit of an act.
Exactly. So he needs to work on emotion, but he's also not a bad speaker.
Sure. And I've been privileged to hear Bill Clinton made a speech once, years ago, and it's the same. He was talking out of his heart, and it was amazing listening to him. I just quickly want to touch on, you're not yourself, you're not a scared man to tell the truth. If I look at what you've said, just in terms of Jacob Zuma, President Zuma, it's just like, is Zuma educated or not? Failing to lead by example, the worst shall govern, some of your articles. And even the untimely death of Ter Blanche and the folly of racialism. So, you've never been threatened having a political opinion, because, we've seen people being killed, just being honest about politics.
Well, I don't believe that there's anybody who ever died before their time.
Yes.
So I don't think that I'm going to die before my time. So if someone shoots me this morning, that would be the end of my life, and that would have been my destiny. Mm-hmm. So I can't prolong my life beyond what God has predestined it to be. That's number one. Number two, what gives me courage, by the way? I get my courage from books. Karl Popper says truth is manifest. So truth is self-expressive. If you see something that is true, you can lie to yourself that you don't see it, but you will know deep down in your heart that it's true. So what I do, my approach to politics is, when I look at politics, I say what I see. So I don't lie. Most of the articles I write, people say are controversial. But actually, if you read my articles, you will know that what I have said is true. So the problem is with our politics currently is that there's a lot of lies going around. People say things, but they don't want to say what they see. So I'm comfortable because I tell the truth.
And if you can give Jacob Zuma any advice, what will that be?
Resign as soon as you can. That's the best advice.
Wrap it up, yeah.
Look, Jacob Zuma is a liability to South Africa. He's doing the worst damage you can imagine. And I think he will go down in history as the worst post-apartheid president. So to save himself from further embarrassment and to save our country, just get out of the union buildings as soon as you can, so that we can start building our nation.
Sure. And then what still gives you hope if you think of South Africa?
It's young people. Look, the thing about young people is that they are unpredictable, number one. Number two, they have whole lives to live in front of them, right? So the old people in society always are scared because they have seen it all. And when they project to the future, they think it's going to be gloom. But let me tell you, societies keep on renewing themselves for as long as there's youthful energy that drives politics. If you look, for example, at the recent local government elections, the leaders of the opposition parties are young. Julius Malema is in his 30s.
Yes,
Musi Maimane in his 30s. Those people are building to construct political careers. Let me tell you, their world will be different from the world of Jacob Zuma.
Sure. Prince Mashele, please become a politician yourself. Thank you for your time. We'll definitely have you back. And we must have some coffee.
Thank you very much.
Jy kan geskakel bly vir jou nuus, weer en verkeer.